Good morning, everybody. Any guesses who's who? Hopefully, I am Annie Chaudhary. I'm Annie Chaudhary, a program manager with the Human Interaction Platform of Windows. I've had very interesting milestones throughout my life at Microsoft, and Windows has always been my passion. It started with certifying people on Windows technologies, moving on to building online platforms for Windows technology commerce and delivery, and moved on now to building technologies for Windows such as ink and text prediction. And with me is...
Hi, I'm Jay Pittman. I'm a developer at Microsoft. I spent the last almost 14 years developing handwriting recognizers for the tablet PC. And before that, I worked in universities, research projects on handwriting recognition and some other recognition technologies dating back to the 1980s.
Okay. Who doesn't ink? Everybody inks. I can see in this room itself, even though you have your new machines, people are still using pens for note-taking. Or maybe some of you are just doodling. Or creating caricatures of Jay and me. So inking has been there through ages. From those reed pens, which many have never even seen on handmade paper, to styluses on these modern digitizers. You've heard a lot about Metro-style apps. I hope so. It's day 3, and we started with Metro-style apps. So when we started thinking of what can we do with inking for Metro-style apps, we said, why not give the developers, that is you guys, a way to spice up your Metro-style apps and create the differentiation by adding pen, precision, and inking. So we created this new set of inking API, which provides you capabilities of creating note annotations, overlays, or create electronic whiteboard, or go the next step and create an app for the next Picasso. You have the power of pen with you. Again, I don't know whether you attended sessions on touch, pointer. One of the phrases we have repeated often is code for touch and get mouse and pen for free. What that means is pointer is what is unifying all these pointing devices of touch, mouse, pen. And if you didn't attend session 185, I would really recommend you to look at the recording. And there is 186 actually going on in parallel with us on pointer. So it's the common denominator property position which is unifying all these three. So even though you code for touch and get pen and mouse for free, but then later on you can create the differentiation required so that pen does something and touch does something else. Like in the app itself, which we'll use to demo, you'll see that differentiation. So today, Jay and I are here to take you through this ink journey of how inking works, the new capabilities of the inking API. A lot of our talk will be focused on demo, and that's what I think you guys want. I will do the front-end user experience using the InkPad app, which all of you have on your machines, and then Jay will take you through the code behind the actions that I demo. So we will do a basic creation and rendering of ink on canvas, some manipulation, and last but not the least, converting ink to text and handwriting recognition. So when you leave today's session, hopefully you are able to create one ink-enabled Metro-style app, or at least add ink to your Metro-style app. Before I dive into how inking works, let's take a look at this app. This is the InkPad app, which was written to showcase all the main capabilities of our API. And it also follows the basic guidelines that you must have heard about Metro-style apps. So we do have the app bar, And app bar has different functions available. Then context menus are there, and we have used some contracts also. There is a file picker. You can play with it. Some of the stuff we will take you through. So I'm writing on this. This is another misconception that I come across often. People think or use this term interchangeably. Pen, ink, pen. What do you guys say? Is it the same? Is it different? Pen is the input mechanism which you use for basic manipulation and interactions. To make the system understand ink, you have to code for it. That's what we are going to do today. You noticed when I wrote on this ink pad how smooth these strokes were. So the strokes that I put in there, they were captured, converted to smooth and rendered on the canvas. I can do some, I don't like the blue color, so I can change the pen color to green. Or I talked about recognition. So because this app has been written for on-demand recognition, so I have to trigger recognition by bringing the app and click recognize. Again, handwriting has become very important, especially as we are not used to writing anymore. It has happened with me. Over years, my handwriting has gone really bad. But that's why you have to ensure that the recognition improves every version. So going back to how inking works. Inking is divided into three distinct areas: capture, manipulate, and recognize. When I brought the pen near the digitizer, that's when the capture started. The pointer API captured the motion and sent it forward. And then the strokes were captured, and if I wanted to do any kind of manipulation, I did the change of pen color. That was also captured and rendered on the canvas. Rendering is using the render helper functionality, which has been optimized for HTML5 canvas and D2D. The thing I forgot to mention is that the sample the app that I'm using is very similar to the Ink SDK sample that is available to you guys for download. And it's written in JavaScript. So this app is written in JavaScript. Once all this capturing and rendering has happened, then we move on to recognition. Now, recognition is not mandatory, but nowadays, a lot of the apps are using text as their primary data type. So it becomes very valuable. Other thing that gets valuable is the types of recognizers you can use. We have about, I think, 25 recognizers that you can call. We are calling the US English recognizer. So that's why it says optional. So it collects the strokes, converts it to the text, and then sends it to the recognizer. Recognizer recognizes not only what you have written. So let's say I had written hi with an exclamation, but my writing was so bad. It also shows you and captures the alternates behind that hi. So here, even though I wrote uppercase hi, it says, did you mean hi exclamation or sentence case or hit or hid or lowercase? And this comes into play really well when you're creating note-taking applications with search functionality, because the search will not only search for the strokes, but it will also search for alternates. So capture, manipulate, and recognize. Let's look at it from the real-time processing view perspective. So everything starts from the input stack. Raw data obtained, position, and if you are looking at other properties like ID and pressure. The developer has a choice. You can use the MS pointer for JavaScript, or if you're using XAML, then you have ICO window. And Windows UI input inking, and I'm not going to keep saying this again and again, I'll just say the namespace, inking namespace, has the capability to create the strokes using the begin, append, and end stroke methods. Lot of manipulation helps in that. Stroke builder, yes, that's important. Render helper, I talked about. Ink manipulation could be erasing, selecting, moving, change of ink color, change of change of the tip depth, width. And then there is handwriting recognition. Again, showed you some rich record results. Clipboard functionality is there, so you can copy, paste, cut, and also serialization. So when you are saving, the save is a GIF file with the ISF format. And then goes and renders. So this is just a view of what I showed you in how inking works. I know this is great, but you must be thinking, okay, but how do I write all this? So, Jay, let's tell our audience something about registering events, pointer, and rendering. So I'll just go back. So as I mentioned that all the code that we are going to show you is from Ink SDK sample. So here we have opened it in VS. But moving forward, what we have done is we have picked up the relevant code snippets and put them on the slides for easier readability. Jay?
Yeah, the source code here in the sample is perhaps a little too complicated for a show like today, in that it has actually 3 canvases that are partially transparent on top of each other, and it has a lot of file interactions with the file pickers and such. And so it seemed to us to be a lot cleaner to go back to the slides and to show just the snippets that actually talk to the Ink Manager. So let's go. Okay, I've got the button, don't I? Okay, so obviously in the HTML we created a canvas, something big, hopefully big enough for plenty of room to write on. And in the JavaScript code, if you're familiar with the JavaScript, this looks pretty standard here. You've gone and fetched a global variable to point to the canvas object and then to the 2D context that's inside of the canvas. And then we've registered 3 callbacks here, handlers, for pointer down, for pointer move, and for pointer up. And this is extremely common code. And then at the bottom here, you notice we've created a new instance of the Ink Manager. This is the thing she was referring to. It will hold the strokes, and it will provide most of the manipulations and compute the Bezier curves for you. Now, let's go look at the first handler, pointer down. The first thing to notice is that the Ink Manager has its own method, process pointer down. And it also has something to go with move and something to go with up. So it fits easily, very conveniently with the 3 handlers that you would have to write here, for the down, for the move, and for the up. And obviously the down, you're telling the Ink Manager, we're starting a new stroke at this point. The process method will be saying, we're adding a new point to the current stroke. And then, of course, the last one will be telling it, okay, we finished this stroke. But before we go on and look at those, I want to talk about a couple of other things. You'll notice the big if statement and the big else if below. As Andy mentioned, we in this app specifically decided to use touch to do something different from what inking does. So you see the check on pointer type equal to 3. Pointer type will be a 2 for touch, a 3 for pen, and a 4 for mouse. And I know it sounds weird that it didn't start with 1. I thought that was weird myself. But they actually use 1 to mean in situations where they do not know what it is. And so with my code structured like this, obviously if that ever happened, I've never seen it. But if it did, we would just ignore it. So I'm handling ink in the upper part of this function and then handling touch separately down below. You'll notice also that I've got the OR with the pointer type equals 4 and the button 1. This was just for my convenience as a developer because sometimes I had to develop on machines that didn't have a pen or that didn't have touch. And so I was using mouse, left button, button equals 1, as a fake pen, and the button 2, the right button on the mouse, as a fake touch so that I could work on my code no matter what machine I was on. There's another point I want to make here, and that is that you see the call to prevent manipulation. Prevent manipulation blocks the normal default processing for all of these, mostly touch, but also pen and mouse, so that what we're telling the system is we're handling the ink, don't start panning things around or zooming or any of that sort of thing. And in a simple program, that would be up at the top of this function outside the if statements, because we'd just be saying, no matter what, don't do any manipulation, any of the default manipulation. But here, we're getting fancy. We're going to say, if it's a pen, prevent manipulation, and then if it's touch, maybe we will, maybe we won't. We'll go further into more if statements in a few slides later. So we will see the code here for the touch a little bit later. But, and one other point, you'll notice that I'm having to do the drawing. So even though I've got an ink manager and I'm telling it to create and store the strokes for me, it doesn't draw on the screen. This is because the same WinRT library here is being used in when you're writing for XAML in C++ or C#, or when you're writing for D2D in C++ or C#. So it doesn't make those calls. So in our case, we have the global pointer to the context, we've started the path, and we've done the move to. And it's the same, the next one, the update, you notice how it's almost the same function, right? We're again checking to be sure it's a mouse, turning off manipulation, passing the current point on to the ink manager, and doing our own line 2 with the context. And again, we're handling a touch move separately from a pen move. And again, the third one, again, looks a lot like it. Again, we have the same if statements, and we're handling touch up separately. And the only thing that's slightly different is that the context has to close off the path here and to draw the stroke. So this causes the stroke to be drawn as Annie was drawing the pen around. And then you'll notice at the bottom there, we call render all strokes. In this particular set, you don't have to do this, but in this particular example program, we actually, every time the pen lifts, we erase the entire canvas and redraw the whole thing. And you'll notice how zippy it was. The implementation down in the canvas, which is shared with IE, is excellent. It's much zippier than I thought it would ever be. In fact, we'll go look at that right now. I think the next slide is... Yes. Now, I slightly screwed up here. I did not put the call... Well, it's really full and busy, but in the real code, it actually erases the whole canvas first. But here you see the code that loops through and redraws all the strokes. Right? So the ink manager has a getStrokes method, and we are calling for each. That's just a standard function that just loops through any standard array in JavaScript. And for each one of the strokes, we are calling the getRendering segments. And normally, getRendering segments doesn't return XY points. It returns segments that would fit a nice Bezier curve. So it happens to give you data then that's an exact match to what the context Bezier, this function here, Bezier curve to, what that needs to draw a Bezier curve. And so this is much faster because, of course, we're not looping per strokes. It's a much smaller count of Bezier curves there. And all the decisions about dividing up the stroke and where to cut it into different Bezier segments is all done inside the ink manager. So you see the code doing taking the first one and positioning the cursor, and then from then on just drawing the Bezier curves. And then after we've looped through all the strokes and closing it off here. And it's pretty fast. And I think that most people who actually write on the thing don't notice that we're echoing completely differently while the pen is drawing compared to after the pen lifts. First of all, they probably don't notice that we redraw the whole thing because it's that fast. And then second of all, we're drawing it in a different way. It's smoother because of the Beziers. The Beziers, in effect, are a low-pass filter that are getting rid of some of the noise that really does not represent what the hand did, some of the jerkiness that you get from XY coordinates. Oh, your turn.
So you saw that it's pretty simple, the creation, rendering. So we talked about manipulation. Before going there, other question that we are asked often when we demo is, can I use my finger to ink? Yes, you can, but not in this app. I told you that we did create a differentiation in this app. So in this app, we are using pen for inking, and the touch is limited to moving some strokes around or panning. So I'll show you what I mean. But also, keep in mind, if you're creating a note-taking app, I cannot take notes with my finger. So I will need pen for that. There is a note space. But if you're doing some small task like Paint Play, it uses finger. Or you have another app, Note Space. There also you can use a finger because you're just taking small short notes. It's not a pad or anything. So coming back to our demo, so I wrote this. So let's see how selection works. So first I'll do the selection with touch, selection of a single stroke. So I selected this stroke. I can again do some kind of manipulation, change color, or I can select and move. So you see, I can already see people thinking, how can I use this in my apps? How can I use this movement of text in my apps, maybe unjumble words or something? It's smooth again. To the normal eye, it doesn't even appear how many times it was erased and re-rendered. Then there is the lasso. Lasso, again, you can either select, let's say I realize I didn't want this, or I didn't want the last ink and question mark. So I will just select it, go to my app and say clear. So it will clear my selection of text. Or I might decide to clear up the whole screen itself. I'll do that in a minute. The other thing for erasing is you can obviously choose erasing from here. If I select erase and then use the pen tip, and I can erase a single stroke. Or if your styluses support it, and these styluses do support the back-end coding, so we have coded the back-end for erasing, like a normal pencil or eraser, so you can erase these. So these are good practices that you can also utilize. Or like I said, I don't want this anymore. I want to clear up my canvas for the next demo that I'll do, so I'll just go and do a clear. So what all did I show? I showed you move with touch, single stroke, selection of your specific strokes, or you can select all the strokes through lasso and erase depending on what you want to erase. So now Jay will take you through the code behind this.
Okay, so the first thing is to selecting the strokes with touch so that you could move it. And this is where we go back to the earlier slides and look at the second half. So in the handler for pointer down, in the half of the code we didn't show before for handling touch, we're actually going back to the Ink Manager and asking for the recognition results. So actually, in this simplified piece of code, you just have to pretend that we've already checked and we know we have recognition results. If she hadn't hit the recognition button, then this wouldn't work. But actually, get recognition results returns an array. It's a normal, standard JavaScript array, so we can always check its length property and see if it's 0. So that would indicate the recognizer hasn't run yet. But here, we're looping over the array, and we're checking to see if the touch that came in, the coordinates inside the event, that's the one argument to this handler, are inside the coordinates, the box, the bounding box of each individual word. So we're going to get, in this array, from get recognition results, we're going to get one element per each word, not for each stroke, but each word that was recognized. And each such word has each result object there has a method called bounding rect that returns the rectangle, and it also has another one called get strokes, which will get you all at one or more strokes that are in that word. So the code should be kind of obvious to you. We're just looping through, checking to see, oh, it was the finger coordinates X and Y inside of each word in turn, and we find a hit, then we will just select the strokes. And you can see that selecting the stroke is extremely trivial. It's just a Boolean property. We just set it to true. And at the bottom there, you'll see we also check to see, did we find any? Because it's possible that you touched off any of the words and just out in the blank space somewhere. So if we found them, we'll call prevent manipulation. If we did not find them, oh, and you also can see here that we're presetting the previous X and Y's to get ready for dragging the word around as we move our finger. But also we turn off this prevent manipulation so that we do not let the system start panning the whole canvas object. But you see then if you touched off screen, then we don't call prevent manipulation, and this way the user can pan the whole screen. And I know that we at some point had a bug, so it is quite possible that the panning doesn't work in the sample that you've got. Of course, I fixed it right after it was too late to get it into the build for these machines that you got. But we can live without that. It was just a minor detail. Now to move the selected strokes. So over in the move handler, again, this is the part of the code now where we're handling finger movement. And you see the code is, we're computing a shift. You can see the offsets being computed there compared to the previous XY where we first touched. And then we're simply calling the ink manager. Ink manager has a method here, move selected. The XY points that are passed in that object are relative, they're shifts. And every time it moves, you notice we call render all strokes. So when she was moving that thing, we were actually redrawing the entire screen every time the thing moved at all. So you can see how zippy it is. And in this code, you can see we're also saving out our new X and Y for the next touch move.
Jay,
yeah.
Quick question. The reason you're re-rendering is to do that Bezier line to remove the jitter.
Yes.
Correct. That's why you're continuously re-rendering.
Yes, and you could get fancy and have a bounding box and render some of the strokes, and it was just simpler to do this. So it makes a good ink sample program, but if you're expecting to have a lot of ink on it, you might want to do more of the traditional thing of having a dirty rectangle and only redrawing within that rectangle. But frankly, I didn't think it was needed. I mean, there can only be so much ink on the screen at one time. The screen is only so big, so I get a slight benefit from it being a tablet. Obviously, if it was a 30-inch display, it might be different. I'm not sure if people will be inking on 30-inch displays. But yes, it's a good point, and I went back and forth, and I was definitely harassed by some of my favorite colleagues at work about this. There's a mode here on this next slide. You'll see there's three values to that: selecting, erasing, and inking. What's kind of nice here is when Annie was doing this selecting, she had the lasso. It looked like a sort of a tan piece of rope. All the code had to do was to set the mode to be selecting, and that will make the ink manager treat the stroke that comes in next as a selecting stroke and not an ink stroke. Right? So that means that the three handlers, the down, the move, and the up, are all still running when you're doing selecting. And they're all still running when you're doing erasing too, because we use that same code. We just set some global properties on the canvas object so like for roping, I just set the color to yellow or sort of a tan color, and I set an image in there to get it a dotted line. I was trying to make it look like rope. It doesn't look that much like rope. And then all the real work is down in the ink manager. The ink manager is taking this the new stroke that we're doing. It's not storing it like it does a normal stroke, and it is looking to see if you've encircled any of the strokes that are already there. And so, my part of the coding here in the JavaScript is extremely trivial. And it's the same with erasing. If you put the ink manager in erasing mode, then it won't store the stroke. It just looks to see if there's any collisions with any of the existing strokes, and if so, it deletes them. And so all I had to do was to change the echoing on the canvas by going in and setting the color to have an alpha of 0 so that you wouldn't see a stroke at all. And I actually set the little cursor to I have a small image of an eraser. And of course, when you get out of erasing mode, I got to set those back. But it's sort of nice that the 3 handlers work for all 3 of those, and there's very little to do. And I wanted to show here, there was no other slide to put this on, but there is actually a delete selected method in the manager too. It could be handy sometimes if you want to delete like a whole word that was just recognized. More demo?
Yep. Just one clarification. It's a developer preview, so being a program manager, I have to say, it was not a bug, Jay.
It was not a bug. Oh, it was not
a bug?
a bug?
Enhancing. So
Enhancing, yeah.
the app that I'm
I thought it was a
using
bug.
is a next version of the app that you have. So my app does have panning in it.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
So you'll
So-
see what I had in mind before I
So
screwed
if
it
you
up.
see, I do have panning.
Doesn't really do much.
Yeah,
without any ink.
right now I haven't anything. So it really helps if you are shifting from portrait mode to landscape mode, and the width and the heights are different, so then it helps. And now moving on to recognition, as I mentioned, our feature crew is really, really passionate about recognition, handwriting recognition with rich record results. And don't even get Jay started on it.
She means me.
He has a lot of history in recognition. So let's say I'm a student. The whole semester I've been taking notes. Now I want to quickly search for something, so I load my notes. Aren't very huge, but I didn't want to write them here. So I loaded the notes that I had taken this semester. And now I want to quickly find some sections where I had mentioned ink. So because I want to gain context, and as Jay said, I will first do recognize, and only then the rest of the actions will be able to work.
My display is terrible.
Yeah, that's okay. We were writing a sample. They will write an app, which is beautiful. So now I want to know where is ink, where all I have mentioned ink. So I bring up the find, and it says, hey, you mentioned it 4 times. And you can notice that it's not consistently written also, but it's kind of recognized. So let's go to the first one. What were the alternates offered here? I have to be, now this is a developer preview. So, and also my finger sometimes is too dry. So here it says, hey, I will also search the other alternates that I have stored are wrap, cap, cork, ink. So if you meant that, I will also store those alternates. On the other hand, the second ink is more kind of clearer, so it remains within ink, inks, ins, infs, ink. So why it helps is, now let's say, actually, I was not writing ink, but I was actually meaning cap. So if I type cap, find, it actually finds that word because that's how it has stored it. So if I was actually searching for cap, it will still find it. So moving back to our code, let's look at the code now.
Okay, so we're going to show just recognition and then finding and selecting all the strokes. So recognition is one call. Well, okay, maybe it's 2 calls. Because we want the results stored in the Ink Manager, and for various reasons, we did not have the recognize call do the storing automatically. The primary reason for that is because recognition is a bit slow. So like the file pickers and sharing and some of the other functions in the WinRT, recognize is an async call. You can see it in the name, so hopefully you get a reminder all the time you're coding that this is asynchronous. And what that means is that when you call recognize async, you are going to, the return value from that method call is a promise. I would have called it a handle, but they're calling it a promise. And you can, on a promise, you can call a then method. And what you're doing is you're queuing up a callback to happen later when recognition finally finishes. And so in this example here, this is really bonehead simple. We're just telling the system to store those results back in the Ink Manager and keep them. But we'll do something a little fancier in just a second here. You'll notice, though, there's an argument to recognize async. It's an enum type of argument. So your choices here are all, selected, and recent. And all is pretty obvious. Selected should be obvious. And recent will actually recognize all the strokes that have come in since the last time you called recognize. Now, one of the reasons for not automatically storing the results in the Ink object is because it's asynchronous, which means while we're waiting for this callback to happen, the user may touch or click or whatever in the interface, and some of our other handlers or other code may run. And so we don't want to be referencing, hit any of our code. We don't want to reference any of our code, hit any of our code that talks to those results while the recognize async might be altering them. So by putting them here in your callback, keep in mind all of your JavaScript is always executed in the same thread, always. So this way, by putting it in this callback, it happens in the main thread along with all the rest of your code. Now let's go look at the real example here. We're calling recognize async. We're asking for all of it. And in the callback, we're looping through these result objects. And for each one, we're asking for its text candidates, that will return a standard normal JavaScript array of plain old JavaScript strings. And we're simply checking them, equals, 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 if you love JavaScript. Notice I've lowercased the candidates, and I've lowercased the target that came in from where she typed it. So we could do case independent matching. You may or may not want that in your own apps, but I hate to say this because I'm one of the ones who wrote the recognizers, but one of the weakest spots in recognition is case. In fact, I've always wondered why our ancestors had to invent this part of our writing system. But you'll see that if we find a match, we're going to do what we did earlier. We're going to ask for all the strokes in that recognition result, loop through it, and just set the strokes, the selected property to true. So it's a very trivial piece of code.
So you created, you rendered, you manipulated, and you recognized. It's as simple as that. So does this statement make sense now? It has been optimized. And even if you have not done inking before, we feel that with this new set of APIs, you can easily ramp up and start coding. The great thing is you have that ink sample I mentioned available to you. So you can reuse the code from there, enhance the code. You may not be okay with how we have used the approach. Like I told you, we didn't use finger touch inking, or we used touch only for specific points. Or you can say, hey, I want to create something for sketching. So I just want that high precision control of a pen. So you can code it that way. Other thing is the API works for both. It's available for JavaScript as well as XAML. You saw the basic modes of operation, and if you look at the app, you will see the remaining. Some of them are you can save, you can load, you can also highlight. So those are the other things. So you can leverage the recognition with alternates for creating note-taking with search. Leverage the stroke conversion to smooth strokes, the Bezier that you saw for painting and drawing. Leverage basic inking for ink annotations or overlays. Like I know many times people send these documents and they want you to quickly comment on them. I would love it if I could just ink on them. Or even the pictures that are shared. I want to highlight something. I just want to ink and say, hey, look at that, instead of saying, hey, on the left corner, top, near that mountain, see this. So things like that. It all depends on you. You have this power. Spice up those apps that you are writing. So what is our call to action? Our call to action is create apps, create more apps. Keep in mind, code for touch and get pen and mouse for free. I'm going to stop here before I show you some of the related sessions and the documentation that you can refer to and open it up for questions. So any clarifications or questions that you have for Jay or me, we welcome those questions.
Is there anything in the API that you omitted from this demo? Any null features, or is this pretty much the whole?
You can save to a file and load it from a file. The file is a GIF file with a ISF metadata attached to it. So the ISF is the ink serial format that was shipped in the tablet PC years ago. So this is the fourth or fifth ship cycle of that code. There's also a function to put the ISF into the clipboard. Cut and paste, so you can paste it to the clipboard and you can retrieve it from the clipboard.
Yeah.
Yes. So actually, one of the demos we've done in the past, but we didn't do today, was to draw something over in
Journal.
a journal.
I can actually show you, or you can use your InkPad.
You can do it yourself.
You can do it yourself. Just put copy paste between journal and InkPad. It works very fine.
The copy and the paste are in the menu
I
that
just
was
showed
in the app bar on the far right. There's sort of a more button in many apps. You see ... as the label on the button. Yeah, that one. So there's a copy and a paste, load and save.
So I can actually select whatever I want. Let's say I just want to copy this. I copy this from here. Go to and here I can, and similarly I can write here and go back to my InkPad and paste there.
Of course, this app is more full-featured than my sample app, and so you can make strokes that I couldn't create in the other one in terms of colors and size. Yeah.
So how does it work with marking up live data? Let's say I wanted to mark up or ink over, I don't know, a stock graph or something like that. I thought the idea with Metro was that you couldn't have overlapping windows.
You're right, you cannot have overlapping windows. So you'd have to have, to the best of my knowledge, you're getting way outside of what I've learned, you'd have to have the app that has the stocks in it, and then you'd have to add to that app
Canvas.
A canvas or something to draw on, probably a canvas where the background is set to alpha 0, so it's transparent. Right? But you'd also have to remember what was under that, so that if you're going to show that to your user later, you only want to show it when that stock is back or that graph or whatever, because if you just put it there and meanwhile it's a day later and the stock price has changed, I don't think it would make sense. Right? So that's a lot of app writing. I didn't get close in this little sample.
Do you know where I can go for more implementation details?
Yeah, well, there's some pointers that come up. Of course, the slide deck is available to you, and the sample app source code is available to you.
Yeah, before we release, we will be working on more documentation. Right now, the documentation that is available to you is only the SDK sample, and there is one more quick start document on creating and displaying. But these are the kind of things we are looking for. Okay, what else would you require help in, so that we can have much more robust library of documents so that you can use those to spice up your apps. And we do have, if you guys are interested, in the slide deck itself, there are some backup slides because we decided we wanted to open it off for questions. So we do have save load code there. So you can look at that. Yeah.
Yes, touch seemed to be limited to single touch. Any thought about
Oh, yeah, I did nothing about that. That's true. Well, actually, in the part where I did not call prevent manipulation, I think you could probably zoom that canvas. I don't know. I never tried it.
No, Zoom we have intentionally.
Oh, is it off?
Yeah.
I turned it off. Okay,
Yeah.
but this turning it on, turning it off is just setting an option in the CSS file. So it's relatively, it's not really coding, right?
Does the recognizer produce meaningful competence at this point
Yeah.
instead of high, middle, and low?
No, it doesn't. It's exactly the same as it was in Win 7. Yes. The question that's more in my original background. You realize before I wrote this sample app, I'd never even heard of JavaScript. The recognizer was written in C, and dates back 15 years. I mean, it's been modified and modified and modified. So I had to do some learning here.
Is it the same tablet PC SDK integration?
It actually is. This is, in effect, a thunking layer on top of it in order to get the projections the way they want for Metro, so that they look the same in C#, in C++, and in JavaScript. And we try to simplify it in a few places. We have the impression that some people would look at the old API and then back off and think it's too much hassle. And so there are some simplifications in here, and I'm sure that at some point somebody's going to send me a nasty email and say, you dropped the one thing I wanted. But we tried to do our best to try to estimate what would be useful in a Metro app. Because keep in mind, the old APIs are still there over on the desktop side.
Yeah, we didn't take out anything from desktop.
Nothing was removed.
Other thing I do want to mention before we move forward is, right now if you go, the SDK sample is JavaScript, but when we release, we will have a C# and C++ sample also available to you.
Yes.
So, are there any guidelines on the stylus itself? I mean, is there a particular requirement that it should be doing this or should be doing that?
Oh, there was always, for the tablet PC, there was a logo process, right? And what would not pass the logo test is the kind of stylus you can typically get at some of our competitors' machines, which are really just a plastic finger. And you can get, I mean, on all of the competing tablets, you can buy an $8 recognizer and use one of those plastic. But the experience, my fear is that a number of potential customers are going to get those, play with it for an afternoon, and then forget about it. And tell all their friends, oh, I tried that and it was bad. And the reason is because without the active pin, by active pin I mean it's transmitting some kind of signal, not just touching, you don't get palm rejection. So when you set, if your palm hits first, and if the code is set to take the first down and block the second, then you'll get pin rejection in favor of your palm. This is not very, and so people are writing and then some of the strokes are missing and they can't figure out what's going on.
Yeah. Actually, you should try that on InkPad because you have an active pen. I hope all of you know you got a pen also with your machines.
To be a pen on a logo
yeah.
Tablet, it will have to be an active pen.
My question
Yeah.
is the pen pressure sensitive or?
Well, the manufacturers can do that or not. Our software will handle the pressure, will record it if it's coming in. And this app could have looked at the pressure and changed the width, for instance, of the ink, but I didn't do that.
So, is there any API where we can get the
Yes, you can get the, and I don't know
Can
exactly.
you repeat the question for others?
Oh, sorry. The question is, can you reach the pressure values through this API? And I believe the answer is yes, but since I never did it, I should be more cautious. Maybe I should check.
Yeah, pressure
there's
is...
a place to send email questions. You might send that one through so that I don't forget it when
Actually,
I get back
once
home.
you start writing apps, we would like you to send us feedback on what all did you use that we did not use in this app, and what was the result.
Well, yeah,
and
you can report
pressure
bugs,
is
too.
Yeah. Feature enhancements,
Feature
Jay.
enhancements, yes. There's somebody over here that I've been missing all day.
Do you recognize other characters, Latin characters like in German or France?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. There's 24 recognizers. All that's in this machine that came out in this build, the build, is just the U.S. English. But we have 4 versions of English, 2 versions of German, and French, 2 versions of Portuguese. We have Norwegian, Danish. We have 2 versions of Norwegian. Danish, Swedish, Finnish, Polish.
I
2
told
versions
you
of Portuguese.
Jay can rattle
This is
them.
this is my thing. Czech,
Oh, you can
Croatian,
rattle all 25.
Serbian. 2 versions of Serbian. You can write in Cyrillic or Latin letters. And then in a separate code base, there's 2 versions of Chinese, and there's Japanese and Korean. So it's a different code base because the emphasis is on the large count of characters.
Is there Dutch?
Yes.
Yes.
I forgot Dutch.
Totally there.
You did say there's Sami.
There's what?
Sami, Finnish.
Yeah, yes, there is Finnish. Finnish is tough because of the the suffixes. It's a lot like Turkish and Hungarian. They have a lot of suffixes. They mark nouns with those things. And so we have a limited dictionary, unfortunately, but it could be better.
I was hoping you asked.
Yeah.
It's Xiaomi.
Xiaomi, yes. I never knew how to say it.
Yeah.
Does the Windows 8 support handwriting recognition in the tip input method?
In which method?
The tip input?
Oh,
The
yes,
tip.
actually it does. If you bring up the on-screen keyboard, there's a button on the far right that kind of vaguely looks like a pen. Oh, there it is. Okay. And in fact, yesterday I saw someone in one of these sessions said, he just randomly grabbed me because he saw that yellow tag I was wearing, and he said, "What is wrong with this keyboard?" He was pointing at this. Somehow he got in here, and he didn't know that there was handwriting, and I realized, God, there's no way for me to sort of tell people at the conference in mass that if you see this, that's not a keyboard. That's for handwriting. And so that is the new version of the tip that, we shipped in Win 7 and in Vista before that. And it's just, well, I'm very proud of the English. One thing I will have to admit, I don't think my Finnish recognizer is as good as my English recognizer. We collected more data. We started in English. We happen to know more about it. And so I'm very proud of it. However, I do know that there's people it performs miserably for. One of them, unfortunately, is named Steve Sinofsky. And the other group of people it doesn't do well on actually are female third-grade teachers who teach cursive handwriting at school, right? Because they write really neat, and that neatness does not help, right? We tend to do much better in sloppy American males.
Hey, so it's good, no? We all write bad.
We do all write bad,
So we
and
can
that's the
know.
kind of data we collected and trained the neural nets on.
And regarding the Finnish, we don't have that much data, but we are constantly working on non-English languages. So we do get constantly feedback, and we keep adding in every version that we release. And we have done it this time also. There was somebody else.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, the Ink Manager API is part of the Windows runtime, right?
Yes, the
Yes.
Windows RT.
But is there a plan to move into the .NET framework so WPF and Silverlight can utilize that?
Oh, no, that's a question I didn't anticipate. You keep, no.
No.
And the reason is because there's already, this is a thunking layer on top of InkOBJ, the tablet API. We had several APIs in the tablet days, right? And they're all still there, right? So you still have all of those, and so they're more complete. But of course, to me, they're more of a pain. I keep hitting that thing because you've got to know your COM to really talk to them. And one of the things that's so nice about these projections is you're just coding in JavaScript or you're just coding in C#, and you can forget all that COM stupidity. And I'm not a COM fan.
Okay, I have to stop Jay here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Simultaneous pen and touch? What's the story there?
You are getting, so that you'll get it down, because and we're benefiting here from the touch guys because they wanted to do multi-finger for the pinch, right? So the pen is being treated as another finger, and so when a pen and a finger or several fingers go down, you'll get a pen down, finger down, pen move, finger move, pen move. They just all come at you all at once, like a fire hose. And we didn't show it here, but there's another property called pointer ID, I think, with a capital I in the middle of that. So when the pen goes down, you'll see like a 432. And then every move, that's that pen, and then the up will have that same 432 or whatever the number is. I say 432 because the last time I was in the debugger, that's what I was chasing. But meanwhile, if your finger goes down, you'll see a 433, and then every time that finger moves, every move has got 433 on it until the finger. And if two fingers are down and you're doing this or you're doing this, these moves, they got 433 and 434 on them. So you can always tell with each move that you process which finger was that, or was that the pen, or was that the mouse, because they've all got these IDs, and every time they go up, then that ID is used, it's done, and it increments for the next down. Right?
So you're going to allow simultaneous pen and touch?
Yes. You could, I didn't do anything in this app.
No, but to his question, you are going to allow simultaneous pen and touch?
Yeah. Yeah, so you can do whatever you want. So you can literally be writing and tapping off to the side if you can figure out what to do with that.
But the operating system will not block it.
No, it does not block. No, and that's the reason that this is working is because down in the low-level code, in a thing I call pointer point, I don't know what they're calling it, the code that handles all of that is all together in one place. It used to be that the pin code was separate because it was from the tablet PC org, and we were outside of Windows at the time, was separate from the mouse handling. But now the mouse handling, the touch handling, and the pin handling are all in one piece of code. A guy named, I can't think of his name, right behind us.
Reed.
Reed is
Thompson.
right behind this wall, giving the talk we wanted you to go to before you came in here, but of course they scheduled it at the same time. But he gave another talk yesterday about that low-level code, and there's another talk right now just behind this wall that Reed is giving again. So if you're really going to write something complicated in here, you're going to get pretty familiar with that MS pointer, those events, and all the options and properties that are down on that EVT argument that came in. There's a lot more than what I showed here, including that pointer ID, and I think there's quite. You can get, for instance, if the pin is moved very fast and it's now quite a ways down, by the time it prepares the move event, you'll get the last point, but you can go back and get all the ones you missed too. And there's other things. I think you can even get a prediction of where it's going, but I never played with that.
I noticed you don't take any temporal data when you put all your points into your recognizer.
That's true.
Haven't you found that temporal data is a good indicator?
That's sort of true too. Yes, one of the recognizers I wrote before I came to Microsoft definitely used the slowdown and speed ups, and so then the whole time I was working on the recognizer with 11 other people here, we were arguing about this. But it is true that the recognizer that we have here is actually throwing that speed up and slow down information away. You'll find it, the people who use it the most are people who do signature, I'm screwing up the sound system, the people who do the signature matching for like a bank application. They want pressure and they want that speed. Those are extremely indicative of your signature because they're affected by the physical shape of your hand. And so one of the big places to use pressure, by the way, other than nice drawing apps, is in the world of signature stuff. But now, signature matching and handwriting recognition are pretty much the opposite things, because I don't want to know who you are, just what you wrote, and it's the other way around for the other guys.
So Jay, I'm going to stop
Oh,
you here.
we're going way over our time.
Because we will go over our time. But what I wanted to let you know is, one, that these are some of the sessions that we mentioned. 185 and 186 is a very important session for Pointer, because I see that people do have Pointer questions. And then we are available in the apps booth right after this presentation for about 30 minutes. And then we will be available from 1 till 3 today near the apps booth.
In other words, we get lunch, but other than
Yeah,
that.
we'll get lunch. And then
Union
we
says we get
welcome
lunch.
all questions. So just stop by there. And actually, we will also have our Pointer guy there. So if you have
Reed will be
questions
there.
on
That's
Pointer. Further reading, quick start. If you have never inked before, this would be a good place to start inking. Ink app sample. Then questions. We are pointing people to the forums. What I really want to ask you to do is please do mention the session number so that it's quickly sent to us. If you say 192, then they know where to send. And thank you.
Thank you.